Hello, everybody. Hope everybody's doing very good today. I know it's about 1 minute past 1 o'clock. I'm going to go ahead and get started. Thank you for being here today. And today is going to be the third session that I have for Understanding Before Doing workshop. And this will be an introduction to project management. And we have an hour and a half on the schedule. I don't necessarily need to take the whole time, but we'll take as much time as you need to ask questions, things like that. Try to show some templates, and then answer your questions as we go. If there's any questions that you may have as I'm going through anything, just please stop me and I'll address any questions you may have. Okay, for the agenda today, um, I'm going to go over the workshop framework. So essentially where we were and where we are today, go over some references. I'll do a quick review of creating a culture of success. That's the plug for leadership and kind of the common fiber that I have throughout the workshop, that leadership is absolutely important. And then I'll address where we are in the planning process when it comes to referencing where planning ends and project management begins. And then we'll get into project management and then some key takeaways. I have some discussion questions, just kind of generate some interaction. And then we'll finish up with any questions you may have. So as you can see here with the workshop framework, today's project management session, the purpose today is just to give you a quick overview of project management, give you definitions, things like that, and then some approaches, some templates, and then we could discuss anything you may have with respect to project management and maybe your approach to project management and how you've seen it play out in your organization. So as you can see, we already went through the foundation, which was the leadership primer. And then the second session was planning. And then today's session will be project management. So here are some of the references that I've used for this presentation. So in the previous two sessions, I referenced the project management body of knowledge guide, seventh edition, process groups and practice guide, Emperor's Handbook. Marcus Aurelius talks a lot about leadership and his notes on leading people. And of course, as the emperor, I know this is in the time of antiquity, but I really feel like a lot of these lessons learned still apply today in leading people and the human dynamic and that approach to relationships and leading large organizations. And then Blink, Malcolm Gladwell. It's a little older book, but it does, hit on some things like bias, and there's some pretty good little exercises that he'll put you through to be able to identify your own biases. And then, of course, I'm a retired Marine, and so I brought in a couple, in this case, a doctrinal publication, and then they call it a Marine Corps warfighting publication, which is not doctrine, and it's sort of like a standard operating procedure, a guide on how to do things. And in this case, this is for planning. And then Agile Practice Guide, another Project Management Institute resource that I pulled as well. So creating a culture of success. So here's the primer for the leadership piece. So lead where you are. And, you know, I'm big on wherever you may be, it's you are either leading or you're observing other people in leadership roles. And so, this first blue banner here, provide guidance, manage risk, make decisions. Those are those three things that the way I look at it is what we expect from our leadership. They provide guidance maybe through the lens of priorities. Maybe they're giving it just verbal guidance. Maybe it's in a letter. Maybe it's a memo. However that leader does it, they're providing that guidance to the team to be able to guide them and focus the team on maybe a clear mission, vision, etc. And then managing risk, that's something that a leader, has on their shoulders on a daily basis. So that's everything. I mean, right now we're talking about budgets. Well, budgets, that's about managing risk, um, and then making decisions, key decisions. So again, these three things, a leader is shouldering these responsibilities on a daily basis. And I think it's important whether you're in a leadership role or you're a direct report and you're seeing people in leadership roles, these are the things that are on their mind. And so those of you that have already went through my first couple workshops or maybe one of the last two, I have these I just like a little roadmap that says from a leadership perspective, you're talking about communicating. Okay, well, you're doing it by providing guidance to the team. And then when you're looking at teaching, where you have to provide that training and mentoring for your direct reports, so that way they can do their jobs effectively. And then performance feedback in the form of performance evaluations or career discussions, things like that. Um, and then with those expectations from a leadership standpoint, you're just expecting those people to implicitly execute their duties. So that way you're not having to go around and have to correct things. So that's ideal, right? In an ideal situation. From a direct report standpoint, and again, looking at it from that lens as a direct report, when it comes to communicating or when you're being communicated to, you're just trying to understand what the leadership wants. And then when you go to that training, you're being mentored, et cetera. You're just trying to learn and you're trying to apply. And then that performance feedback, you're trying to understand overall performance of yourself. And then what are those things that you have to sustain and improve? And then at the end of the day, your expectation is that you just want to perform to standard, period, end of text. So right here is where I see the execution of duties where you're being maybe trained, you're being mentored, you're actually learning, you're applying, you're actually doing your job, and then you have this performance feedback loop where you may be getting trained, and then you're being mentored as you're going through and you're applying. Maybe you're getting course corrections, etc. But that's the execution of duties, and then your overall performance, and then you're trying to get to these expectations. But and something I've always talked about is there's always four things that are combating relationships, and that's that self-induced friction, external friction, physical and mental friction, always at bay, right? They're always lurking. And so that self-induced friction that we talked about could be unclear goals. It could be lack of priorities set in an organization. It could be plans that are put in place that are vague at best or not properly communicated. So there's a lot of confusion within the organization. That's all self-induced friction. Things that you can't control, things that, as from a leadership standpoint, you should be able to mitigate that friction for the people that you've been entrusted to lead. And then for that external, those external friction is all those things that you cannot control. And so what I would always tell the people that I would lead is, hey, those things that we cannot control, that's okay. Right? You can't change it. So the one thing that you can control is the way you respond to it. How do you react to it? Because a lot of times, hopefully, you're being proactive and you might have seen some of these things coming down the pipe so that you're able to better prepare yourself when a change comes in. Maybe it's a policy change, maybe new regulation, whatever it may be. Maybe it's a new person in charge, so they have a different way of doing business. Those are some of the things that you can't control who's going to be in that leadership role. You can't control necessarily the way they think. So it's the way you respond to that. And then physical, I always look at it as maybe you're working long hours, things of that nature. You're not eating properly. You're not getting the amount of rest that maybe you require, things of that nature, and be able to communicate to make sure that you're able to mitigate that in the performance of your duties. And then mental friction, as we know, life is real, and we're always combating that in our own lives and then here at work. So what are those things that help us mitigate that, those four types of friction to be able to um, harness some kind of cohesion here in the workplace? And from a leadership standpoint, I look at, humility, being able to listen to people, being able to take on board different recommendations, things like that. And as we know, humility is the opposite of arrogance. So, being able to listen, be able to just acknowledge the things that you know and the things that you don't know. And I think it's okay to say you don't know. And I've said this plenty of times. I get it. If you say I don't know too many times, you're probably an incompetent person. But again, that all depends on your role in that situation. But there's going to be times that we as humans, we don't know everything, and it's okay to say I don't know once in a while. And that shows some humility and that human connection to the people that you're leading. And then authenticity is huge. Just being authentic, being your authentic self, being who you are, and is that makes you as a leader approachable. So and it breaks down a lot of barriers as well. And then that positive mental attitude. This goes back to that external friction, and and all four of these types of friction. I think a positive mental attitude definitely helps mitigate and combat the four types of friction. Because once again, I'm not saying a positive mental attitude means that when something bad happens, you actually turn it into something good. No, you have to acknowledge that something bad has occurred, yes, but the way you approach it and the way you respond, I believe that is where the juice is when it comes to having that positive mental attitude. So all in all, when you're looking at it from the top, being consistent, being persistent, having the energy and patience to deal with, if you're in that leadership role, there's going to be honest mistakes, and you got to allow people the latitude to grow, make mistakes, and it's okay, and not to have knee-jerk reactions, things like that within the workplace. And again, that goes back to that self-induced friction, things that you can't control as a leader, and then being able to respond in a way that is appropriate for whatever situation that has been laid at your feet. Okay, so obviously looking at leadership, I see this picture. You have Denali reflecting off of Wonder Lake, and it looks beautiful. And I think a lot of times when you look at a job posting and it's about leadership, and then maybe there's some things about that particular job post and being a leader that is it looks beautiful from afar, right? Kind of just looking at this photo. But there's challenges, and those challenges are conflict management among employees. You got biases. That biases is the people that maybe colleagues, maybe direct reports, and oh, by the way, yourself, and being able to identify the biases that you have. And that goes back to Malcolm Gladwell, the book Blink, will put you through some of those exercises to be able to identify those biases yourself as well. Um, and because professional insecurity here is one of those things where are you comfortable? Are you authentic? Are you your authentic self within the job that you currently have? Will allow you to be able to provide those three things that we talked about up front that leaders do on a regular basis, providing guidance, managing risk, and making decisions. And when you're looking at it through those lenses and you have conflict management, biases, professional insecurity that somebody may be experiencing, all that impacts how you provide guidance, how you manage risk, and how you're going to make those decisions that are absolutely important. And I used to, um, as a Marine, and I was an officer, retired as a lieutenant colonel, and I would always tell my people that I was leading, like, hey, if you hear me say something and it doesn't make sense, you need to challenge me. I may be tired, I may be hungry, I may be grumpy, I may be in a bad attitude for whatever reason. Um, there may be things going on at home that I'm not going to bring to work, and then something gets triggered. But you have to have that type of relationship with your people to be able to say, hey, it's okay. Again, that if you say something, it's okay to be challenged. And then, but I would tell them be tactful, right? You don't want to be. It's that whole play of human relationships. It's a dynamic um, that that is probably one of the most challenging things we do in the workplace. And so those recommended actions. So this leads me to emotional intelligence, having that empathy, being able to understand, maybe putting yourself in other people's shoes, things of that nature. Be engaged and be involved. Um, this, we used to call it pedestrian leadership. Get up, go and talk to your people. And I get it. We're in an environment right now that we're virtual. I mean, we're literally on Zoom right now. So, but being able to be engaged, be involved in what your people are doing, what your colleagues are doing, that also will knock down barriers. Lead people and manage things mentality. And I think that's just huge. Leading people, engaging people as humans, not as robots. Um, and then managing things. So there may be a timeline, there may be a schedule, there may be deadlines, there may be things that we need to quote unquote manage. Um, but you manage those things differently than when you interact with people and humans. So it's at the end of the day, leadership is a very at its core, it's a very human thing. It's a human it's a dynamic that is absolutely important to be able to understand yourself, others, and then to have that empathy, to put yourself in their shoes. They may be having a bad day, etc. And just because they're having a bad day doesn't mean it needs to ruin a relationship forever. Um, so just again, being able to do some of these things, understanding who your people are, all that good stuff will help mitigate. So why do I say all this, right? We're talking about project management. So it's like, okay, why is this important? Well, at the end of the day, you're going to be engaging your people because you need to get feedback. You need to be tracking tasks. You need to be able to talk to people. They need to be able to tell you honestly where they're at. Are they having an issue? Do they have a blockage? And they got to be comfortable bringing that kind of stuff to you to say, yep, I'm having an issue here. And then they know that your reaction is going to be such that it's like, okay, let's work through this. That's the reaction they want. But if they know that they're not going to get that, you're going to have issues. So that brings me to project management. So where are we at in the planning process when it comes to project management? So like I said, I introduced this in my second session within my workshop, which is a planning process. So 5 steps. Now you're here at transition, step 5, and now you're going into execution mode. So at this point, you've thought about the problem. You think at this point you should have a pretty good understanding of what the problem is. You went through, you developed a solution, you've evaluated that solution, then you put it on paper through a written plan, or however your organization would do that and capture that. And then how would you articulate it back out to the team? And now you're in execution mode. So that's where we're at in the planning process. We're ready to start executing the plan. So, like I talked about in that step 5, the whole purpose is to transition the team's focus from planning to execution. And we do it with the kickoff meeting. And then you have the common understanding of the plan, expectations that are set, and acknowledging that the project has begun. So, project management overview. Um, Before I go any further, does anybody have any questions, comments, anything up until this point? Okay. So for the project management overview, so I'm going to get right into the definition of project management. And I went over this in my first session just as a quick overview, but we didn't do the deep dive. So, but project management is the application of knowledge, skills, tools, and techniques to project activities to meet the project requirements. Um, and then the project management body of knowledge guide, they talk about, the project management process groups through the initiating, planning, executing, monitoring, controlling, and then closing. And again, when you're looking at these processes, project management comes into play right here. When you're executing, you're monitoring, you're controlling activities, and then you close out the project itself. So again, just went over that, and this is where, like for executing, you put the project plans into action. So, but how do we do that? You have your kickoff meeting that puts everybody on the same page, and we move out smartly, start executing our tasks. And then here's that monitoring, controlling. They talk about measure and analyze performance to determine if the project is staying true to the project plan. Again, you have your milestones, you have all that good stuff that are in play, and now you're tracking. And then closing, bring formal early end to a project. The way I do it here at the project management or here at the Data Science Institute as a project manager, I make sure that there's a lessons learned report at the end of each project. Um, Again, why is project management important? Well, at the end of the day, it just helps your team organize the monitoring and controlling of tasks and deliverables as you're executing, um, through your project. Because without that, how do you know where you're at? When you have to provide an update. I know the project that I had to oversee and am overseeing, we have to provide a quarterly report. So in that quarterly report, I'm tracking critical tasks, critical milestones. There may be metrics that have to capture. So all that good stuff. And that's all part of this. So project management is important because of that. Um, I so this is something, we talk about the project team. So what does that look like? Well, this is just an example, and something I created when I took over the project that I was leading here at the Data Science Institute. And so I captured stakeholders, who's paying the bills, who are the people that are that are interested in what I'm doing. The leadership team, in this case, it was our director. He had a co he had a co-lead. Some of you on this call may recognize some of these names. Our deputy here at the Data Science Institute, and then we're dealing with a uh, a secure uh, a secure analysis enclave where researchers can put protected health information into this enclave to then be able to collaborate amongst their lab. And so HIPAA was obviously highly important. And this brings me to a point, in the planning session, we talked about that, being able to identify all those key people that you need at the table while you're going and putting together your organization chart. And then, here I put Scrum Master because a lot of times there's some organizations you don't have the luxury to identify a singular Scrum Master, and that's all that person ever does. But in this case, I'm a program manager, and then there's some projects that I'm leading that are outside of this particular project, and I would say that I definitely fill the role of Scrum Master. And then project team planners being able to list out all those folks so that way if you have something going on within your project, this leads back to tasks. Who's doing what? When are they doing it? And then how are you following up if you don't know who all the key players are? So this is a way to capture that. And then when you start assigning tasks, you're actually assigning it to a person. That would be ideal. So project management considerations. So I'm sure some of you have seen the project management triangle where you're looking at the scope of the project, time, cost, which all will ultimately impact quality. So the scope of the project in and of itself, what are we trying to accomplish? What is the minimal viable product is another way to capture scope. And then but that leads to how much time do you actually have to accomplish what you set out to do? And then what is that budget? So if you have a little bit of time, um, you know, and then you have a little bit of a budget, right? You probably won't be able to bring on all the people that you need. The scope of the project may be smaller, maybe the quality, that minimal viable product, it's probably going to be at best a prototype that won't be ready for mass use. So like being able to think through how is this going to impact the quality of what we're trying to achieve. And when you're looking at the planning piece, you should have already identified, like, I don't have all the time in the world. None of us do. We don't have all the money in the world, right? We have a budget, and then what is that scope? So being able to shape that during the planning rather than trying to manage expectations once you've told somebody maybe during planning and now you've transitioned that we're going to go and do this big old thing, but you should have identified that you don't have the money and you don't have the time to be able to produce something of that quality. So that's that whole piece when it comes to project considerations. And then being able to say, okay, what is the strategic importance, need for innovation, the complexity, uh, resources. It could be anything from, again, it could be people power, right? Like how much, what are the subject matter experts and how many do you need? Maybe it's in the form of hardware. So here at the Data Science Institute, we're always talking about um, the hardware that we need to use. Maybe it's software that we need to get, and that all costs money. So being able to take all those things in consideration. And the last thing I put down here is integration. So like the number of departments involved, this goes back to the subject matter experts. How many subject matter experts do you have within your own organization? And then how many do you need outside of it? And that could bring that complexity to your project as well. So organization considerations, this goes back to how much time do you have available, uh, with respect to, in this case, this last bullet here, the human and physical resources, right? But at the end of the day, you're looking at like, okay, what's the importance of this project? What is the percentage of core work that is going to involve these projects? And in this case, it could be a project singular or projects plural, and then making sure that you're able to manage that whole piece. Um, One thing that I would say is when it comes to projects, again, if you see my title, it says program manager, and that's because I have multiple projects that I'm managing. Um, and then if you're a project manager, well, you just have one single project would be the idea, right? So when you're playing on these words, um, but at the end of the day, like how many people are working on projects? Like how many? And then to be able to say goes back to the the project management triangle. But again, these are all those considerations that and decisions that need to be made by the leadership within the organization before they set out to accomplish whatever you're trying to do. So some project management methodologies. So I listed out three. Predictive, also referenced as waterfall or traditional. If you look in the project management body of knowledge, it'll reference it as predictive. And then you have agile, which primarily has been used for software development. But you're going to find that agile methodology can be tailored for a number of different projects. Um, it looks like it's being cut off here, but it's Lab Scrum. And we just had a workshop with Lab Scrum. And essentially, what they've done is they've taken the methodology of Scrum and Agile and applied it to the academic environment, specifically for a lab. So a PI leading the lab can then organize that particular project just like they would an agile project. Same thing, having a scrum master, being able to run those meetings that can be repetitive, that could be part of your cadence. You've heard of stand-ups. Stand-ups should last no more than 15 minutes, and that's where you have your teams set around. Maybe you have 5 teams, so then the level of detail that you need to go into that would be, okay, you have 5 teams, you have 15 minutes, everybody has 3 minutes to brief, and you're only going to be talking about what did you do between now and the last stand up, what are you going to do now to your next stand up, and then do you have any blockages, any issues, any problems that are blocking you from achieving um, between now and your next stand up? And that's it. It's just those three things. It's very succinct. And we just started doing that here, the Data Science Institute, for one of our projects. We brought in our team, and I'll tell you, you would think like 15 minutes, a meeting can really last 15 minutes. I'm telling you, as long as you have that detailed agenda, you understand the purpose of what you're doing. I mean, our meeting so far, knock on wood, we've already had, think we're at number 6 right now, and this particular project is going to be ongoing um, till August at minimum. Um, and we haven't gone over 15 minutes. Matter of fact, we're right at like 12 minutes. We're being very disciplined about it. And the team is starting to understand, hey, let's get in, let's talk about what we need to, and let's get out. So that way we can get to the real work. And then the hybrid, this is primarily, even in the military, yeah, we didn't do software development per se, um, in my line of work. But hybrid, you do have predicted, meaning there's gonna be a timeline, and you can kind of see from the characteristics of the 4 categories of life cycles, this table 3 tech 1. Um, so you have all the different approaches right here. You see the requirements, the activities, the delivery, and the goal. So as you're looking at, like predictive, it's the requirements are fixed. So the activity is going to be performed once. So I'll do it. Let's say construction, you're building a home. So you lay the foundation. You only have one foundation for your house, right? Ideally, right? You have one foundation. So that task is only be conducted one time. That's it. You're done. So predictive is like that. It's fixed. You're gonna have this very, very lockstep approach to building a home. When it comes to other types of projects, like the one I was just talking about, with um, the one I got hired to manage, there are things in there that software engineers, et cetera, that they're going to have to do some iterating. So that's why this approach, iterative, very much agile. Even though you have agile broken out here, iterative is definitely, you're repeated until correct. So same thing with agile. It's dynamic. You're repeating those tasks until they're correct. Um, and then you're going to have frequent small deliveries, which means that you're going to have, say, a in if you're executing, um, say, a very specific code within a software that needs to run something. Well, a lot of times it's going to be compartmentalized just to that one singular code, but then you're going to have to do another code for something completely different, that could be complementary in nature. But you're going to deliver one, then you got to move on to the next one, and it'll be smaller in scale. So I'm not going to get into sprints, but a lot of times sprints only last 2 weeks for one singular task. But again, that goes back to, if you have a project that's ongoing for 6 months, we could do the quick math. You can see how many small deliveries you're going to have along the way. But hybrid, once again, you're going to have agile components, and then you're going to have predictive components. And the way I would look at this and tell you to frame it is, predictive is that big frame that goes all the way around, and agile is you're actually executing along the way to your ultimate goal, which is that minimal viable product that you're going after. So expectation management. So for project management expectations, um, it helps with tracking tasks, milestone achievement, schedules, critical due dates, overall project timeline, helps with managing resources and budget, helps with communicating across stakeholders, project management team, the project team itself. Um, it will help with facilitating, collaborating, and timely accomplishment of tasks. So as you can see that at the end of the day, you're tracking the progress of your project, period. So, and I think that that's what you should expect when when somebody's saying, well, yeah, we're doing quote unquote project management, and you're going to see some of the tools that I'm going to introduce to you, and I'm sure you've seen them and probably used them. Um, I think some of the limitations here are important to identify. Um, that first one right there, project management, it's not a substitute for effective leadership. You still got to have that solid leadership to provide, if there's any hiccups along the way, the leadership steps in, provides that guidance. They're managing the risk of the organization. They're making those decisions to keep the project moving. It doesn't substitute proper planning. So if you didn't do proper planning and now you're in executing or execution, then you're not, you know, if you failed in planning, you're gonna have to go back and make sure that you do some proper planning in wherever your stuck point may be to then get you back on track and then put it back into the schedule of those tasks that you have laid out and milestones, correct those, and then you could continue on with your project management. Does not substitute sound judgment, self-explanatory there, and it doesn't substitute decision making across a project team. So you still need that leadership to be involved to make sure as we get to those stuck points, there may be two members of the team that may be in conflict because of the direction they want to go. Leadership needs to come in and say, all right, I'm the tiebreaker. This is what's going on. So we'll get into the project management templates and tools. So um, these these templates right here are things that um, I think you've heard of. You probably used them, but like a Gantt chart, the work breakdown structure, a racing matrix, the project tracker, if you have multiple projects, um, a project plan, project roles and responsibilities, and I do have some templates, um, that are here at this particular link. But what I wanted to do here is just call out that a lot of times when we confuse planning with project management is when we take a Gantt chart from the beginning of an idea and then we start trying to put together a Gantt chart, but we didn't think about the problem, right? We haven't gone through planning. And so a lot of times a Gantt chart will get reverse engineered to then be able to play out and say, well, we did some planning. The work breakdown structure as well. That's where you're breaking down, and I'll show you some of these templates. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop share. Now I'm going to show you some of these templates. Does anybody have any questions, or is any of these like? Does anybody want to see anything in particular? Okay. Okay. Here's a Gantt chart right here, and this is just a template, and so you kind of see here, there might be from the top, this is they just call it Project Light, the name of the company, and then they have the project start date, and then here they have milestone description, the category, who's it been assigned to, what's the progress, start, and the number of days that you predict that you're going to be able to accomplish that particular task. So for the project charter, that's something that needs to get written out, if that's what you call it. Here uh, at the Data Science Institute, when I got here, it was called a project charter. We call it a project plan. I mean, it's whatever your organization may call that. So essentially, what I look at that is that's the written plan. And so you would have that'd be, in this case, it's a goal. I would say it's a requirement that needs to be done and put in place. And then who is it assigned to? So you'll actually give a person's name here, and then you'll be tracking the progress And this thing will allow you, as you can see here, it's broken down by month, days, etc. And it could go out as far out as you need it to go. And then as you could see here, it just continues on down. There may be some research that needs to be conducted. Um, Maybe the identification of stakeholders. Maybe for contracts, you need to have that proposal written out. Um, Document review, when the bid, things of that nature, like the award date. So like these key dates, that'll be a milestone and make sure that you have everything situated by then. And then, and it just continues on depending on whatever your project that you're about to put together. Uh, Obviously you would put what is appropriate for these milestones and goals. Does anybody have any question about the Gantt chart? So that's just one. There's several. I mean, there's so many out there, um, and that's the beauty of project management. If you don't like that template, you could create your own. As long as you and your team understand what is being captured on that Gantt chart, you're good to go. Uh, I like this work breakdown structure. I'm about to show you. It's a template. Okay, so let me see. So I'm a paying member of the Project Management Institute, and so I was able to pull this from their webpage, and these are some of the resources that are available to paying members. And so, as you can see here from the top, plan schedule development, creative work, breakdown structure, and this gives you the guidelines. It breaks it all down of how to actually use it. So why is it useful? A key to successful project schedule is identify all the work of the project before you consider delivery dates and resource constraints. So this goes back to making sure that you do proper planning, right? Because you don't, again, this could be one of these items that becomes a reverse engineered planning document, which it's not a planning document. But again, this could help you capture some of those critical things that you need to have as you set out to execute your project. So right here it starts off with the scope and then create the work breakdown structure, and it breaks it all down. And then at the end, depending on the different levels. I mean, I don't want to go into too much detail because this will get us into a rabbit hole, and I could probably spend 30 minutes just on this one document, if not an hour. And then, um, but you'll have this. So you can see here, like for instance, here's a work breakdown structure for building a home, right? So site preparation, you got to do the layout, the grading, excavating, and then foundation, erect the forms, pour the concrete, remove the forms. Then you got a frame, floor joists. Okay, install first floor if you have two floors, and it just breaks it all down. So this is what I would call phasing construct. So when you're doing your planning, you're actually laying out a phasing construct that's something I've discussed during my planning session. Um, so this would be essentially that. And then you would just break it all down. Uh, and this breaks it all the way down. Now you're getting into brass tacks. So then when you get to the actual table, this is where, again, the activity name, the description, uh, what is the deliverable, who owns it, all that good stuff. And it goes all the way across. I mean, in this case, it's even estimated cost. So like this can help you even with budget. So it's so many, it could be so many things that it can help you with depending on the how complex your project is. And I'll be honest with you, since I've been here and the project that I've been working on, and I have not, I've had to use the work breakdown structure one time and it's this last project that is a data science institute proper um, project that I've used. I brought out the work breakdown structure because We had a number of people that were doing a number of tasks to be able to help our lead planner get through that. So as we went through the actual planning, um, it does help. So here's a racing matrix. What I like about this particular form right here, it breaks down the abbreviations right up front, right? So it's like guide to abbreviations. So RACI, it stands for responsible, accountable, consulted, informed. So it breaks it down. The person who actually owns the project, task for work. An example would be the project manager, blah, blah, blah. Who's accountable, the person who will sign off on the work, the who's been consulted, and then who's been informed. So this allows you to keep track of that. So that work breakdown structure that we just put that we just looked at, you could actually put and link that particular form and right to here to then be able to say, okay, here's the activity of the task, and then who are all those people? Like you're putting people's names here. So it'd be like, okay, who's who's responsible? That's going to be Rudy, right? Who's accountable? That's going to be my boss. So I'll put director, and then who's being, who's being consulted. That could be a subject matter expert that isn't necessary on the project itself, or maybe they are, and they're just being consulted to be able to give some subject matter expert. Boom, they're put there. Then who's being informed? That informed may be just a stakeholder, right? They're not executing anything, but we're keeping them abreast of the activities that we're executing. So pretty easy form to fill out if this is going to be useful. And what I would say is this, just because it's a project management template doesn't mean it applies to your organization. Maybe it doesn't apply the way you do it. So these are just tools. So if it's something that you don't necessarily like, you're like, nah, I think that'd be a waste of my time for this. That's okay. And that's what I love about project management is that you make it your own as long as you're able to execute. And the way I would look at it is as long as whoever is the project lead, they're happy with it and they're good. And then you're able to do that in line with their expectations of how you're going to be managing the project. Okay, and I'm gonna get in. Okay, so before I move off, I know I didn't go through each one of these, but um, again, you'll be able to have these templates, and then at any given time, you have a question, if you start, needing to use one of these, um, just you could always ping me as well, and I'll help you with whatever you need. But like a couple of these are self-explanatory. But like the Gantt chart, if you never put one together, it can be a little bit of a challenge, but once you get it, it's easy day. But I'm willing to help out whatever you need. And then for project management software and tools, so like there's Asana. Currently, we use Asana here at the Data Science Institute. I don't know if sure everybody has heard of Microsoft 365, Teams, etc. Smart Sheets. The project that I'm working on, it does use Smart Sheets, Jira, and it's mainly for software development. And one of the projects that we're running, we're using Jira. So, and it works well. And then Trello, it creates visual templates. I'm sure you've heard of like Kanban boards, checklists. It'll create all kinds of stuff. There's all kinds of project management software and tools out there. And what I would say is what works best for you. So one of the things, what I want to do is I want to show you, say like a smart sheet. So you're like, okay, I have my project. We have our milestones. We have our metrics. Well, what does all that mean? So what I want to do is I will show you, I'm going to try to show you this because I think that this will help visualize when we're talking about identifying things in when you're doing planning into project management. So this right here is Smart Sheets. So as you can see from the top, this is FY24. You're able to attach, in this case, I have my budget attached here. I have the project plan that's written out, which would be like the project charter. It's written out, it's right here. And then you can see like critical metrics. So they didn't tell me to put this here, right? This is what we came up with as a team. And then you can see a key result. These key results are the tasks. So these are all tied to a task. And then as you can see, I have a start, end date, milestones, whatever it may be, and then being able to go all the way across. So, and this is tracking for fiscal year 24. And then here's your critical milestones that we're tracking, and you can see um, production use of my of this particular enclave. Well, we're in progress. So these are all the things that we've already hit, we've completed so far. Knock on wood, we've been on time. And then here I have to give my quarterly status explanation. And really, when I say mine, it's our director. This is his project. I just help manage it. And so I make sure that whatever I put in here, he sees what I put in here, right? And so goes back to that, you know, leaders make decisions, they're providing that guidance, they're managing the risk. Um, and so all this stuff is being captured. So the way they have me do it here is I have to capture the next quarter's um, status explanation, right? Or in this case, where are we at right now? So, and then what I do is at the beginning of Q1, these are the critical milestones, blah, 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 and I just start breaking it all down. And then the next quarter action plans are actually captured. So right before I start Q2, I had to put this out. So this is before I even start, right? Before I get into that second quarter, in at the end of first quarter, I'm already explaining what we're going to be executing in Q2. So this goes back to if you do the proper planning, right? And then you're tracking your project, doing these things like these, like this update, it's easy because you would have thought about all those things already. And you don't have to make things up. And so, and then it just flows. But then it keeps you on track and it keeps you on time and it keeps everybody informed. So that again, this is just a way, this is just a tool. And I wanted to show you all because this is something that I'm using here at the U of A. And it's powerful, it works, and everybody's informed. Okay, so I put this together because I wanted to just show where it all comes together. And so I've introduced like the two lanes, the leadership direct report lane. I talked about the four types of friction, and then the approach, a leadership approach, where you have humility, authenticity, and a positive mental attitude to get that team to then get into planning. Because I think just about every organization probably does some level of planning, and then you get into probably some level of project management and then get you to project success. And so, when I started putting this together, it's like, hey, you're leading where you are. Um, with that being consistent, persistent, you have that energy and patience. And and if you are leading or you're being led, then you have somebody, you're helping them do these three things, right? Providing that guidance, managing the risk, and making those decisions, key decisions. And the better the input, the better the research of that information to that leader, the better informed those decisions are going to be made. And probably everybody won't be in total 100% in agreement in those decisions, but you're probably going to come closer than just shooting in the dark. So this is just putting it all together. Got the leadership as a foundation, got some planning, got to do some project management, and then you got to get to project success. And then it's probably rinse and repeat. You got to do it all over again. But the one thing that stays the same is going to be that leadership, is going to remain the foundation of whatever you have to do. Projects will come and go. Projects will look different. Um, Projects will be managed differently. But the one thing that will remain the same primarily will be the leadership. So some key takeaways here, leadership, I can't talk enough about it being the foundation, but whoever's in charge, and I say that, my military background, but like whoever's in those leadership positions, they're responsible for creating that work environment where those teams can thrive. And I talk about thriving because you want to bring out the best in the people that you lead, so that way you can achieve good, solid solutions in the end. And it's not going to happen without, positive and productive dialogue, that cooperation, collaboration, and critical thinking. And we're not robots, we're still human. And I know we got chatbots out there. ChatGPT will help us get to a point, but it is not going to solve every problem. It's not going to think about everything. You still need to have that knowledge, that knowledge to bring to the table as a team member. And leaders and team members must understand the role and take ownership of their contributions. And again, this is within the organization, but for project success, if that's what you're working toward. Project management does not think for you. Just like I talked about, planning doesn't think for you. You still need to bring in your own knowledge to be able to do that. And then understanding before doing, it's continuous. As you can see, even in the middle of executing, and you're in the middle of, say, you're in second quarter of executing your plan for fiscal year 24. In my case, there are still things that are going to come up that I'm going to have to make adjustments to the plan. But again, you already will have a solid foundation to be able to pivot if something like that happens. So we're going to get into discussion, but we're right at an hour. Um, is everybody okay with just taking maybe like a 5 minute, five or 10 minute bow break? We come back and I'll have some discussions. So I'm just gonna put this out to the group, and I just want to make it informal, nothing crazy, and really just want to get your ideas on some of this stuff, even though it may be in a form of a question, but like, you know, you could rephrase it however you like. But and I'll just start with the first one, and this is no particular order. We go in any arrangement here, but I'll just start from the top here and just ask the group, like you could provide a leadership example or leadership attribute you can implement immediately to enhance cooperation, collaboration, communication across your team. Um, and I've added a couple during my presentation here and during this workshop, but those definitely are not the only ones that make people successful. Um, so I would just love to hear from this talented group of people of like, what are some leadership examples or leadership attributes have you seen in place that work?
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Go for it, Jerry. I got you loud and
Uh,
clear.
I found what typically works for me, especially with my time in the Air Force, is like just genuinely getting to know your people. Um, like going around touching base, really knowing like what makes them tick, how they work, how they like to operate. And that for me opened up a ton of doors as far as getting people to cooperate and communicate and then collaborate on the things that we need to get done to achieve whatever goal is in front of us.
Absolutely. That's powerful. And I think that plays with that authenticity when you're interacting with people, um, it's it matters and it breaks down barriers. And so I wrote an article for the Marine Corps Gazette, and it actually got published in August of 2019. And and the name of the article is Humility and Leadership. And I talk about authenticity, and I talk about knowing your people. And and I wrote that when you take care of your people, they tend to take care of you. And I think that rings true of what you just said. Like they know that you care about them, but not because you think that's the way it needs to be and that way it makes you a better leader, but like you really don't feel like that in your heart. That matters. And they're gonna see that difference. So getting to know your people genuinely, like you're talking about and the way you're describing it, I think is extremely powerful. Torbit.
Yeah, following up on that, I think maintaining contact with those people,
Ooh,
maintaining regular communication channels, having that almost vulnerability to be open with people, communicating where you're at, whether that's through I think a stand up, for example, is a way to implement that throughout a project or just throughout your work. And yeah, I do think regular contact between a leader and a report is important, and um, authentic communication, and the leader being positive through the challenges that the report team may be experiencing. And I think a lot of times it's hard to be vulnerable like that. So knowing the people well enough, like the first point that was made, that people are comfortable doing that is important.
that's awesome. Julie,
I think
thank you,
another,
Torbit.
yep, I think another thing that's really important, I agree with everything that's been said so far, but expressing gratitude and appreciation along the way with the work that they're doing, how they're doing it, so that they know that you're building that relationship, that you care and it matters, but you're acknowledging their efforts along the way, I think is another key factor that goes a long way to, making sure that everybody's supporting each other. I mean, a project never is successful without the sum of its total, right? I mean, if any one person is there, but I think if people feel appreciated, then the desire or the encouragement to go that extra mile, because we all know that projects never go according to plan. So if you've built that relationship, you've acknowledged their effort, then when a course correction happens, they're usually a little bit more flexible and understanding that maybe some of the work that they've done so far isn't going to be used, but that you've acknowledged and you're thankful for everything they've contributed so far. So I think gratitude is really important too.
I love that, Julie. I I mean, I can't agree with you more. And I think if you think about, wherever you are now, maybe when you first started into the workforce, you could probably remember those people that said thank you and those people that didn't say thank you and how you felt. And I think that it does matter. So that's a great point, Julie. Thank you for bringing that up. It's great. Anybody else? Okay, we'll move on. Move on to this the second one. Why is leadership important to project success? And what I would say there too is not just project success, but like team success.
I think it kind of goes back to what Julie was saying. Things aren't going to go as planned, right? So uh, that leadership, someone has to be in a leadership role to, steer the boat, to corral the chaos and keep things in full motion. So that's all I would have to say as far as that one.
Oh yeah, yeah, because there's uncertainty, right? And like Julie said, I love it because, and I'm sure Jerry and I'm sure other folks have maybe have heard this, but don't fall in love with the plan, right? Because the plan will inevitably change. Um, so, uh, but being able to be, yeah, having that leadership in place, that when those uncertain elements arise, it's like bam, like okay, we got rudder steer. Julie, you got your hand up.
Yep, I think another reason that those are important is because there's a trust factor that comes too. You know, project success doesn't really happen on its own, but there has to be a trust. The team needs to trust the project manager that they're gonna take them on a good path. You know, I think when we talked about humility, that it's good to say, you know, oops, we made a mistake. And I think if your team is looking at the leader as the project manager, that there's trust there, that there's appreciation, but there's an acknowledgement if something goes awry. I mean, I would know that I would trust a leader that is willing to acknowledge their mistake.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
So
that's
I think
huge.
leadership kind of incorporates all of those things. And if you have that kind of leadership leading a project, then even though it may not be on time or in budget or whatever, but you're still going to have a successful project, or you're at least going to be able to recognize that you're not going to get to where you want to go sooner.
Love it. I mean, I can't concur with you more. Yeah, it's awesome. Torben, you were going to comment?
Yeah, building on the previous points, again, 100% agree. Just, going through these workshops with you and, reflecting back on experiences I've had as a reportee or as a leader, just realizing how complex, like how many tools there are out there for program management to help ensure project success. And how leadership ties in throughout the process and how nuanced it is, how complicated it can be. And I can look back at past experience I've had that haven't gone as well. And I'm like, okay, really, if you understand before doing, this is where a pitfall can happen. And, if you fail to plan, you're planning to fail. And so we do the best we can as leaders, but I think there's so much room for me to grow and learn more about being a leader, learning about these um, tools are out there and program management. It's very complex, and just how important the leadership aspect is throughout all of it is yeah, it's very eye opening, all this.
All right, thanks for those comments. That's solid. Thank you, Torben. So I'm going to get to the third point here. How can planning help you in developing effective project plans in the future? Like, I don't know if anybody, I think there's only a couple that went through, I think 3 or 4, not I think 3, that went through the planning session that I put together. Now it's like getting to this point with project management, you're executing. You think planning is helpful? Or I should say, do you think planning would be helpful?
Okay, so I think planning is very important to the success of your project. I think it is unfortunate that there are times doing very large projects, small projects, where enough time is not given to proper planning. I'll make a generalization that in our environment with the university, things are happening very fast. There are things that are moving, that the desire to move straight into execution without proper planning, unfortunately, is a fairly common occurrence. I'm not speaking for everyone, but I will say that I'm in UITS, and we do find that sometimes that things are moving very fast in IT, that having done some projects with a lot of planning, that you are more prepared to handle a quicker turnaround or a shorter planning, because you can really hone in on what are those things you need to look at right away. Like in my case, maybe I'm looking at the risk. Budget isn't really a concern, timeline may not be, but I'm looking at risk as something that may be the first thing that's going to throw us off the rails. So I think having some projects where you've been able to do really good planning will prepare you for those opportunities where your planning window is a little short, or your project plan is a little leaner than what you would like it to be.
And Julie, that's great. So I received my project professional or my project management professional certification right from PMI back in September, on September 11th of all days. And so one of the things I did is I did a deep dive on that project management body of knowledge, 7th edition. I read every page. I'm not saying that just to tell you guys that, but I went through it. And the reason I went through it is because I wanted to see where I could find planning and how it was mentioned in that book. And I'll tell you, like some of the things, it was daunting to me. And that's how I was motivated and inspired to come up with my 5-step planning process, because there wasn't a planning process. And what it said was, just make sure you don't spend too much time on planning. And I'll reference, I should have that ready reference. I don't, and I couldn't believe, like, it was just, that was like the advice was like, yeah, just make sure you don't put too much. I'm ad-libbing, but essentially what it said, it's written. I couldn't believe it. And yeah, it's like Dwight D. Eisenhower, right? He said, like, plans are nothing, planning is everything. And I think what he meant by that, and there's so many explanations and interpretations of that quote, but it goes back to, and we've said it here, when things change, you need to have a point of reference to pivot from. And I think when change happens, and at least if you didn't have a plan in the first place, and let's just say there's a change, which, how do you know that's a change? You didn't even identify it before. But let's just say there's a change. Well, then now you have chaos within the organization, rather than having a cool, calm, and collected approach to then addressing the pivot, because there's that change that comes in, and you're like, okay, all right, team, we said we're going this direction, now we got to go here, rather than, hey, we didn't have a plan in the first place, so we got to like really figure this out. That's a different conversation altogether. So I love what we're saying. This is great. I'm gonna get to the last one. Torben, go ahead.
Yeah, just when I'm listening to this discussion, one thing I'm thinking about, I think is maybe even, I'm sure this happens in other environments as well, but in the university environment, I think people overextend themselves with projects, and I'm thinking, some people may have the philosophy, oh, I just want to touch this and I just want to at least have some influence on it. But just the more I think about it, I probably think it's not best to get involved in a project, especially as a leader, if you're not going to have the space and time to plan properly, to understand, think ahead before doing, to implement some of these tools if you can. I mean, some people may just try to get involved and mean well, and just they know they don't have the time for the planning, but they're like, oh, I want to be involved in that project, and I don't want to say no. But I think saying no sometimes may be best for the overall mission. I would like to hear your thoughts on that, and the other people's thoughts on maybe just like, when do you think it's best to say no versus getting involved if you can't do it well? I'm just thinking now it's just better to say no up front than getting involved and knowing you're not going to be able to carry through on these important steps.
So, I mean, I'll just make a comment. So, in the military, and I think Jerry, you could probably back me up on this. We were always told you can't say no to the commander, and I'll tell you, I call BS on that big time, because it goes back to making sure that, here we look at the triangle, right? The project management triangle. And in the military, you know, and I've introduced it during my planning, is like, okay, um, is it feasible? Is it acceptable? Is it complete? We used to call it distinguishable because we had multiple plans that we had to present to the commander. And is it suitable for the situation, right? And if it's not, but this is what I would say to that. You may not be able to come out and you don't want to tell the director or, you know, whoever's, you know, in charge or whatever, to like, absolutely, we're not going to do it that way and cause like a very toxic environment, you know, in a matter of seconds. Um, but you could be like, did you consider these things and be able to present it in a way that I would hope should lead us to the point of no, we shouldn't go down that road because it's not even going to accomplish, and we don't have the resources to accomplish what you're saying, and those expectations are are they're not realistic. So I think there's a point where you have to be able to say no, but as people in those situations, we need to be mindful that saying no like that could, again, in this environment, could be disrespectful. But what I'm saying is when you're putting a bunch of human resources against something, I think there has to be somebody that says, this doesn't make sense. This is the why, but here's an alternate solution. So we don't want to admire a problem. We want to present alternative solutions, because the solution that we're currently have selected may not be the one that we need to go with. But we need to be agile, mentally agile, to be able to say, hey, this isn't gonna work. So I mean that's right. Does anybody have something to say about that? Okay. I'm gonna get to the last one because I do have to break, because I have to be at a meeting at 2:30. Um, it's our team meeting for Data Science Institute, but I definitely want to get to this last one. What project management software tools can you implement in current or future projects to achieve project success? And so I showed you some. I don't know if anybody out there has seen something different that worked for you that you can maybe provide to the family here. Okay. Okay. Got it. Team, this has been a great conversation, great discussion, and Um, I'm gonna be running this session again. I'm probably gonna make some tweaks to the material. Um, just due to some feedback, and um, and I think the first one I actually do have the dates, and I'll make sure that we put it out, and I'll actually put it on the when I finish building out the GitHub page. I'm definitely gonna put the dates of next semester sessions. Okay, so for the fall, that series is going to go, the first one will be on the leadership session will be 18 September. And then 2 October will be the planning session, and then 30 October for the project management. I look forward to seeing everybody next semester, and this will be the last session for this semester, as we prepare for um, next semester, and hope we get some of these graduates on their way. So congratulations to them. But thank you to everybody. I appreciate you, and we'll see you next time.